In the last episode, I've talked about giving up politics and other non-actionable addictions. Two questions immediately arise, however. Does this mean giving up on the world? Does it mean sacrificing all impact? And can you stay safe without being 24/7 in the loop following the news, politics, the economy, and everything else? Hello and welcome to Valiant Growth, the podcast that empowers you to earn self-esteem, build amazing relationships, and achieve freedom through radical personal development. I'm your host, Philip Frey, and today we're talking about how to stop worrying about the world without giving up on it. Well, I know a guy who knows an example of someone who talked the talk when it comes to achieving freedom from politics on his own term, while staying extremely safe and still having an impact, at least until his complete disappearance from the Siskiyou Mountains of Northern California in 1974, and then again recently with the rediscovery of his works. Today I have Shane Radliff with me, who is quickly becoming an authority on this elusive man from the late 60s and early 70s. Shane, how did you discover Rayo?
Essentially, it was during the direct action series that we did over Liberty Under Attack, most of 2016, and the colleague that I actually do the show with, he pointed me in the direction of, he's like, I'm hearing about this guy and someone wrote up like a book review on it. It sounds interesting, but that's the only thing I can really find about him on the internet. And I was like, okay, well, shoot, I'll go ahead and buy it I'll just go ahead and purchase it. It was about $30 US on Amazon. And there's still, another handful of copies out there. But so I purchased the book, and it was essentially just kind of like a blind grab. I had no idea what to expect. My colleague didn't either, Kyle Reardon. We didn't know if it was going to be complete crap. We didn't know if it was going to be something valuable. And I read the book myself, and I started talking to him about it, and I was like, this is pretty incredible. This is Rayo's ideas, whether they were theory, like theoretical, or whether they're the practice of Vanu, it was honestly incredible. So I told Kyle, I was like, man, there's nothing on him on the internet. I was like, we need to digitize this book. So what I did is I was the only one with the physical copy. I typed out the entire book into Microsoft Word. And then got a copy to Kyle, and we proofread it a bunch of times, and then we recorded an audiobook for it. But I definitely see a lot of value in what Rayo had to say back in the 60s and 70s, making these radical life choices and these changes from living in Southern California and moving out of the city into a van. He called it van nomadism. Now it's called van dwelling. You can find a bunch of people doing that on YouTube. But back in the 60s, the stuff he was doing. So after he moved into the van, he decided that he wanted to, go further. So he moved out into the middle of the woods and lived in a polyethylene A tent. So it essentially is, like a tarp. And he's an engineer. He made some innovations to it. And him and his free-mate, Roberta, they lived out there in the woods for quite some time. He typed on a typewriter into a bunch of libertarian publications. And it's just honestly incredible, Philip, to look back on what he was doing in the 60s. He kind of laid the groundwork for so much, including like the survivalism stuff. For some of your listeners are familiar with them, but he was one of the first ones to write about food storage. He didn't have a refrigerator out there in the middle of the woods. For half of the year it wasn't necessary because it's a lot of snow and cold and such, but he didn't have any of these amenities that we've kind of become comfortable with, and it's honestly incredible what he was able to find out, and then also the groundwork that he laid for this very, very plausible freedom strategy known as Vanu, this all-encompassing yet very, very flexible lifestyle change that I think has a lot of potential in bringing about personal freedom.
Yeah, what hooked me and what made him really interesting to me, and I'm guessing that it was probably the same in your case as well, is that he essentially offered a strategy towards autonomy, towards invulnerability from coercion, as he put it, that was completely individualistic. Almost everybody's strategy involves either political action or definitely has an element of go out and you got to convince people, you got to proselytize, and it kind of goes nowhere and it puts your success completely out of your hands. And then in comes Rayo. Don't do that. That's a waste of time. Here's what you do to become invulnerable to coercion on your own.
He even did kind of the groupie thing before he decided to go move out in the woods in his van. He was involved with the objectivist movement there in California. He did some work with the Nathaniel Branden Institute, and he worked with others. I mean, there was a project that he was hoping to become involved in, the Free Isles Project, which was supposed to start a libertarian new country. But he realized that these collective movements 99.9% of the time go nowhere, and when they actually do go somewhere, one of the issues with the collective movements is that the more people you get and the more people that join your group, which is kind of necessary considering the subject, the more diluted the goal becomes, and you get further away from the original goal. So Ray saw that as a waste of time. And that's actually counterproductive in some instances. So yeah, he definitely promoted he definitely advocated against that, and instead advocated for finding freedom yourself without needing anybody else. So I guess that's kind of the reasoning of why he kind of came to the decision that he did.
There's some great personal development angles in that thinking. There's I could bring up the Stoic idea of the circles of control and influence, and not worrying and trying to change things that are outside your control. Nathaniel Branden himself, I don't know if he put it exactly like this, but he was saying that whenever you set a goal whose achievement is outside of your control and depends on a lot of other people, and especially if that's like a central goal of your life, that's very risky and it's probably not going to work. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's really interesting is the person himself. Can we go a little bit more into his background and what kind of personality he had? You have a story that I really liked about a person spending a week with him and corresponding with him. And there were two quotes there that really endeared him to me. One was Tom being it's an alternative name. Was that his real name?
So his real name was Tom Marshall, and then he switched to a nom de plume or a pseudonym. He started with El Rey, and then it changed to Rayo. So yeah, whenever you read Tom Marshall, that is Rayo. But once he started caring about security culture a little more and privacy, he decided to go with a pseudonym.
Yeah, and Vonu is the strategy just to get these new terms embedded.
And actually, can I real quick before we get into this, can I go ahead and define Vonu just for the sake of the listeners, because I think that I do think that is important. So Vonu is essentially, it's just an invulnerability to coercion, and this could be public or private. I mean, it could be government or private crime, whatever. It's an awkward contraction of voluntary, not vulnerable. And just to kind of add just a little more to that to provide some clarity here, Vonu is shades of gray. It's not black or white. You can do it in the city. You can do it in rural areas. You can do it out in the middle of the woods. You can do it on the water, which is what I'm most interested in. I mean, it's a very open system, and it can fit to your lifestyle. I just want to provide that clarification before we start getting real into things.
The apolitical angle really stuck with me. I don't think I would have brought it up as a topic on Valiant Growth if that wasn't the case. If this was just like, oh, this is libertarian strategy number, 1 million. I wouldn't have done that, but I really get the impression that it doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are. Or whether you have them or it's more religious. It's basically if your goal is this, getting away, protecting yourself, becoming invulnerable to coercion, as he put it, It just works. But let's get back to the person.
Yep.
The two quotes. So basically, this guy who writes about him visits him in the woods. He starts showing him things. Of course, as you know, you put any two high IQ people together, this is what happens. So this is the quote. I asked Tom many theoretical questions. These were matters he dealt with only in print, he said. Meeting with libertarians, he almost always dealt with questions of nuts and bolts. That sounds great. And the other quote that really endeared him to me was, Tom bragged about the high durability and comfort of his shirt, which he found in a public dump.
I figured you like that one.
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of guy. But yeah, so what kind of person was he? And a little bit more about his life story and how he got to this decision and what happened with him in the end.
Yeah. So just for some context, So Rayo, for this was probably about 5 to 7 years. I don't know the exact day when he moved out into his van, but this was probably about 5 years after being a Vanuan. So he held this something called Vanu Week, where he would people that he corresponded with. He had very good security culture, and I'm sure you kind of saw that by that article. So
security culture being
secure the right to privacy applied in all aspects of your life. So as an example of that, I'll refer to this article. Benjamin Best, who's the author of this, was talking about whenever they were trying to find where Rayo was at, where they were supposed to meet Rayo. And Rayo gave them little clues and hints and geographical markers, but he didn't give them an address or anything. And they had whenever Benjamin and the woman he was with got to that point, they had to do a distinct whistle, and then Rayo came out of the woods. So he was a very, very private guy. He was an engineer, super smart. And I think that kind of some of the structures that he engineered, I think, are kind of evocative of that. So Ben kind of lays out. He kind of lays out. And I'll just read a quote or two from here, because Benjamin Best actually knew Tom or Rayo. Again, same guy. Quote: After working as an engineer in the Bahamas, Tom arrived in the ideologically seminal atmosphere of Los Angeles in the early 1960s. Harry Brown was at the Henry George School. Joseph Galambos was promoting concepts of competing governments with emphasis on deference to intellectual property, and the Nathaniel Branden Institute was teaching Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy to a wide audience. Tom enrolled in an NBI course, but his prime interest was applying ideas and achieving personal freedom through experimentation and direct action outside of the political process. His initial effort, Preform, was the first instance of someone attempting to form a new libertarian country. He attracted many intelligent, capable, and creative people to the project. So, and I'll end quote there. He was a very, very innovative person. Before anyone was really thinking about these ideas, he was already, before people were were actually seeing the scourge of government, Tom was talking about starting a libertarian country. So I think that's pretty incredible. And as we kind of get further into this discussion, and also for those listeners of yours that are interested in the book, they can find that at vonupodcast.com. Again, free PDF and free audiobook that you guys can check out. But you'll see throughout that book just he was definitely a pioneer, in promoting concepts. I mean, he kind of predicted predicted the rise of the country shoppers. Pete Siskiyou. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. He kind of predicted the creation of cryptocurrencies. He talked about and the ethical enclaves, which is essentially the equivalent to agorism, but it predates it. He's talking about underground banks that the credits were transferred over the net. So I mean, he kind of saw the creation of cryptocurrencies. He kind of said something similar about 3D printing. About it actually, being putting in a couple inputs and coming out with foodstuffs. So he kind of foresaw the way things were going to go, and how technology was going to, advance the idea of Vonu. He was extremely intelligent, and he was a pioneer. And he did disappear in 1974, and no one's heard from him since. So and at this time he would be, probably like 75 to 80, age 75 to 80. So it is possible that he may still be alive. But I mean, obviously there's no way to know that. Yeah, as I've said in the Vonnie podcast, you can't really just, call him up on Skype and see what's going on.
Yeah, so he gradually retreated more and more from society until he basically broke all contact, and that was that.
Essentially, yeah.
I think he's in a prime position to be like the whenever a libertarian like religion appears, to be the central mythical figure. I mean, this is just a great story. You could have him like he's still, whenever a libertarian is in doubt, Rayo appears, giant beard.
Oh man. Yeah, I could too, but I mean the stuff that he talked about is extremely unpopular to probably like 95% of libertarians today. So yeah, I don't know if that's possible. If things change a lot and it kind of shifts to what Ray was talking about, sure, I think that'd be possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good question. Why do you think that he had relatively limited appeal to his peers, and maybe even today?
It was essentially that what he was promoting was extremely radical, and I mean you look at it today, and there's still not a whole lot of focus on action. So just imagine back in the 60s, trying to promote like, okay guys, we know government's bad, we know free markets work, and we know that we want freedom. How do we do it? And everyone is like, well, we need to philosophize a little bit more before we do anything. So he was, and I think that's a reason for then and today, the philosophizing over action. The focus on principles and ethics, which I think are good, but there comes a time and a place when action needs to happen. Hopefully now is the time when Vonnie can be adopted by more folks. So yeah, I think just to reiterate, he was ahead of his time, and the focus was on philosophizing, not primarily on action.
Let's say somebody picked up the book, or got it from your website,
mm-hmm.
and they're not interested in libertarianism. What do you think they could get out of? Could they get anything out of the book? And if so, what would that be that they could use in?
Yeah, so if someone's apolitical or they aren't a libertarian, I think with Vonnie, I mean, sure, anyone could pick up and use Vonnie, but I think those who are more liberty inclined or about personal freedom, I think they're more inclined to pick up and use Vonnie. That said, if someone's apolitical and they aren't interested in that aspect of it, I would just recommend in part one. One of the most valuable chapters there is the Mean Time to Harassment article, which is what Rayo kind of formulated to gauge the efficacy of Vonnie. So he kind of headed it off at the front. When people say, well, Vonnie is not practical, he's like, okay, well, let's actually apply Mean Time to Harassment to it and see if it's profitable. But yeah, I'd recommend definitely that one, and that's in section 1. And then also there's one chapter. I don't remember what it's called off. It's some thoughts on he had like some thoughts on freedom strategy 1 through 5. So I don't remember if it's 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5. I apologize, but it's the one with the where he went through the definitions of Vonnie, liberty, and freedom. I think that's also valuable too, as he kind of defines terms. So I'd say that one, Mean Time to Harassment in section 1, and then section 2 where it's all practice. I think anybody could find value in that portion. Solutions on finding freedom, and kind of Rayo went into a lot of detail about what he found valuable, what worked, what didn't work, his failures, what him and Dr. G learned about Dr. Gather with Roberta, what they learned about living in the woods, how they dealt with food storage, and then just there's just so much stuff in section 2. And also what might be valuable to you and maybe your listeners too is he was he was going through like the frugal food budget thing before like far before his time. I think he's probably one of the first ones to do that, but well, maybe not one of the first ones to do it, but the way that he did it, I think he was definitely a pioneer in that realm. But there were a couple of chapters where he just went through like where he got his fruit from, the price, and just it was pretty in depth, to be completely honest. So I think pretty much anyone could find value in section 2, whether it's for entertainment or if they're actually looking to implement Vonu. Because it's even today it is it is kind of hard to think about. And when you consider the fact that he was doing this in the 60s and 70s, it's pretty incredible.
Would it be fair to say that Vonu can be useful for anyone who is dissatisfied about some aspect of society and wants to do something, wants to get some actionable knowledge on what to do, how to diminish the impact that particular thing has on his life, and even how to create a community that as a whole is resistant to that?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah, no matter what someone's really dissatisfied with, if they're trying to become more invulnerable to coercion, if they're just dissatisfied with culture as it is, if they aren't happy with living in a city, if they aren't happy with associating with certain folks, or if they just are ready for a change and they want to try something new. I think a lot of those strategies that Rayo presented, I mean, they could be applied, in the context of like, avoiding coercion from government, avoiding coercion from private criminals, or just an aspiration for more, for more freedom. I mean, some of the strategies that he kind of laid out, and I'm sure we can get more into these as we go along, but the minimalist sailboating, which is really interesting. I mean, the country shopping angle. He mentioned Vonuing in cities, which if we're going to deal with that one, we need to do that separately. There's a lot to go into there, but he gives a lot of ideas for how to find freedom now without asking for permission. And obviously, just kind of take this to heart too whenever you're reading his book. This was the 60s and 70s, and obviously technology has changed a lot in that amount of time. So and that's kind of one of the reasons that we're doing the Vonu podcast. Season 1 will be kind of the theory, what Rayo said. Season 2 will be the practice, what Rayo said, and then season 3 we're going to develop and kind of adapt it to today. So some of that stuff might be outdated. But I mean, if that's something that interests you, just make sure to check out the podcast when we get to season 3, which I don't know when that's going to be. No idea. But anyways, yeah, I think you're right. That's anyone can kind of pick this up if they're dissatisfied with the way things are, or certain people or aspects of society.
Yeah, and they don't want to change everybody and devote their lives to that, or even even if they just first want to build a strong position to work from. Rayo didn't do that, but I can see that as an application, that you first achieve freedom for yourself, and then you can say, okay, what aspects of this can I bring to other people, and what kind of influence can I have? I think I kind of like both. What I don't like is people who basically start with, how can I change everybody else, and how can I change these huge institutions and their influence and their actions? And I don't like it because it doesn't seem to work very well.
Vonu it's very, very secure. You've got to have security culture to be a Vonuan. I mean, it's just kind of I guess I don't like wording it like that, but there's got to be some aspect of security culture because you are trying to stay secure in your home base. So I don't know how much you could, or I don't know how much exposure a Vonuan would want to have, and kind of spreading this to others. But yeah, I think with the alternative media and the advent of encryption and things of that nature, I think, yeah, I certainly think, find freedom for yourself first, and then, report and try to help others, get to that same point. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, I can absolutely see this, happening today a lot more than, back in the 70s when was it 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
When 60s, 70s when he was doing it. I mean, you can just have a pseudonym and do, a lot of be really present, if, with encryption, with everything else. Probably gonna get easier in the future too. Or heck, use your own name. If nobody can find you, it doesn't matter.
That is a good point. Yes, that is a good point. Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing too, because I've been really surprised by, I guess not really surprised, but by the feedback we've gotten about the podcast. People are really, really looking for solutions, and they're kind of, they're sick of the constant ones that are propagated that are just, are failures, and they always have been. So I think Vonu really does provide a real path to freedom, or whatever your goals are, in the context of financial independence or whatever. I think Vonu can definitely be of assistance to you.
Right, so let's go into the strategies then. I think we definitely hopefully we sold the idea at this point. By this point,
the way that we're doing it for the podcast, when we get to the practice portion, is we're starting with the I guess the financial part first. Before we provide you with strategies that'll cost you money. It's probably good to give some ways to make money first, right? Or how to become financially independent. So I know what Rayo kind of talked about when it, for the context that he spoke of financially independent early retirement. Different than what you hear. Like, I know you had Jake DeSillis on your show. It's a little different than what DeSillis was talking about. His version of it was more so just freelancing. So essentially, you like if you're something creative like a writer or an artist, that'd be good. So what he kind of talked about the most was, go work and so get your Vonu home base secure, and then go back and work for 3 months, 6 months, however long you need to work to be able to come back to your home base and survive for 6 months. So living extremely frugally. Frugality is very, very crucial here, especially when you consider the mobility aspect of it. So if you're living in a van, you aren't going to have be able to have that much stuff. You're not be able to fit that much stuff. And obviously the goal is to return less and less. The frugality and the intensive saving is certainly an aspect of kind of making Vonu work. So I think that's kind of the difference there. It's not having a permanent portfolio, at least not for Rayo. It wasn't necessarily a permanent portfolio. It was just saving a lot, increasing that food storage, having the right equipment to I guess put together the polyethylene A tent. It was very, very basic. Kind of went a little different there, but yeah, I think the financial independent part is the place to start. Make the money first.
Yeah. So basically that was what was available to him at the time, but now you can do the 4 ways to quit the rat race.
Yeah, there are a lot more options nowadays. Makes it a lot more possible. So if Rayo could do this back then with what little technology he had to work with, just imagine how obviously there are new challenges that arise, but it's definitely more possible today. Definitely.
Yeah, he can open up his laptop and manage his Vanguard.
That's true. He was sitting in that polyethylene A tent writing on a typewriter. So
yeah. Okay, so personal finance, financial independence. What's next?
Yep. So there's one other aspect. I mentioned this in passing. Ethical enclaves. So that'd be essentially trading in the black and gray markets, illegal but not immoral. I guess some examples of this would be, running your own business, running an underground business without a license, not paying taxes. Let's say that I need some surgery from somebody, and Philip, you're a doctor, and you need, and I'm actually, I'm a contractor, builder, and you need your kitchen remodeled, and I need surgery. So what we do is we trade services, and we don't report it on taxes and save a lot of money. So that was one thing that Rayo kind of proposed as something that could be of value to those trying to become Vanuans. I guess we'll move forward here next to the van nomadism aspect, and again, this is what Rayo started with. This was the first thing that he did whenever he decided he was sick of waiting around for others who wanted to philosophize all day long. He decided to move out of his apartment and go live in a van with Dr. G, Dr. Gatherer. One important aspect of this is that mobility was crucial to him. If you're stationary, if you're in one place most of the time, like if you're like if in my house right now, I'm stationary. My house can't move. Then I'm more vulnerable to coercion than say if I move every 2 weeks or something. If I change locations every 2 weeks. So that was one reason Rayo really favored the van nomadism. But he did mention, and this was kind of a downside, and unfortunately there's no solution today as of yet. But Rayo did rely on legal interstices. That's what he called legal loopholes. He relied on legal loopholes when it came to the van, and it definitely bothered him so much so that he said this quote: "The price of living in a van is some submission to the bludge." He called the police and government agents bludgies. There's that too. Quote: "The price of living in a van is some submission to the bludge, maintaining a driver's license, paying attention to the legalities of parking in a particular area, etc. Well, in the van we are, in large part, enjoying liberty, legal interstices, not vonu, and laws and their interpretations often change." End quote. So obviously, just kind of, I know you don't have a car, Philip, but just ponder this. So you're driving around, no license plate, no registration, no insurance. If you don't have a driver's license, or if you don't have a license plate, you're gonna get pulled over pretty quickly. And that's gonna make you more vulnerable to coercion. So what Rayo, it's kind of a requirement as far as Vonu. If you're trying to become more invulnerable to coercion, I mean, there's gonna have to be some submission to those slave tags, as Rayo called them. So that was one kind of drawback that he saw with the van nomadism thing, and that's still not resolved today. As far as I know, in every single state here in the so-called geographic location known as America, you got to have a driver's license and registration, and in most states you got to have liability insurance too. Still not a solution to that. So for Vonuans today, and for those that are going to be doing the van nomadism strategy, that's probably something you're going to have to do. I can see he was not happy with that. Like, it's not security culture, right? And just to explain, maybe the listeners might not know or might have not yet gotten the difference. He really preferred solutions that were, I guess, true Vonu, that really made you invulnerable to coercion, as opposed to legal loopholes. I guess because of the fragility and of the loopholes. So I just wanted to add that note. And even if you do some trick with your license or whatever, that's still just a loophole. You can't really just do your own thing. Yes, that is true, and he certainly favored Vonu. He said something along the lines of in the book, and I'm going to paraphrase, but legal loopholes are often closed, right? So once some liberator finds a legal loophole for something, people start utilizing that. Well, what does the government do? They close that loophole. And there are a lot of folks today that strictly rely upon legal interstices, like for example the constitutionalist patriot movement here today in the United States. They rely on, it's all about legal interstices, and that's Ray would obviously see a problem with that, as kind of do I. Yeah, and you're playing in their court.
So let's say you want to join a socialist commune. Basically, I'm guessing in the U.S., other parts of the world right now, you don't want your children going to government school and being indoctrinated in, I don't know, capitalism or something. You want to keep them at home. And right now, you could do that in some places. Mm-hmm. But as long as the the government agents can know where you are at any point. That that law could change at any point, as as it has before. And then that's it. Like, your children are gonna be taken at least to school, if not more. So that's a constant vulnerability there.
Yes, and to extrapolate beyond that point, even if you're trying your best to follow the law, there's actually an example. There's actually an example I'm thinking of now. There's an article published in FEE, the Freedom for Economic Education, and this lady in New York she pulled her kids out of public schools, and she went line by line and did all of their, like, fulfilled all the requirements that New York required her to, and they still came and took her kids. So even when you're using legal interstices and you're staying within the law, I mean, again, the unstable aspect of it. Yeah, I mean, you don't really have control over that. You're just relying on coercers of some kind or another to not come and coerce you. So that's definitely a reason why Rayo was against the legal interstices and far more for Vonu.
If you're a parent or you want to have children and you want to make sure, like, you want to homeschool, unschool, something like that, there's a good reason to learn more about Vonu right there.
Yes, and also to kind of combine this with another aspect of Vonu, you may want to consider some country shopping too, because I guess the legal interstices, at least here in America, are becoming less and less stable. So maybe you should, and actually, country shopping or perpetual traveling, or just expatriation, that is legal interstice. So you can utilize one legal interstice, the legal interstices of another country, to avoid the unstable legal interstices here in America. So that's kind of getting into the so maybe the parents could say, okay, here in America this is getting a little rough. Let me see if I can go to a different country where I can teach my child in peace. So that kind of combines it with another aspect of that Rayo kind of promoted.
Yeah, and I've met people who've been doing this, like they got out of Sweden because of this, and now they're world travelers. So there are people doing it, and I guess this is still not Vonu technically, but I would say that realistically you will probably be able to country shop forever. And my guess, where it's a loophole, but there will probably always be a loophole somewhere.
Country shopping is it is very, very Vonu. I mean, we can go ahead and talk about that if you want to, since we're already on the subject.
Let's do it.
Okay, good deal. So yeah, country shopping would be perpetual traveling, or just expatriating, whatever. You can shop in one country, or you can shop in 20, depending upon whatever you're trying to do. But Rayo kind of laid out one idea. And keep in mind, in that Benjamin Best article, he was an engineer in the Bahamas, so this is where this example comes from. But he talked about making your money in somewhere else than you spend it. So for example, like let's say I work on a farm here in America for 6 months, and then whenever I intensively save and I can go live, I find a different country, like let's say the Bahamas, where they're going to harass. Like if I'm only spending money there, they're not going to harass me. Other than that, I mean, you can combine so many of these. Like I mentioned, the minimalist sailboating. You could, you can live on the water. You can go to different countries. I mean, and that's another aspect of these too. You can combine these, like the country, like let's say country shopping. You could have country shopping, minimalist sailboating, and you could have like an intentional community too. I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but you can combine like all of these. You can combine a lot of these strategies. But back to country shopping. I guess just one downside. It does require, it does require legal interstices, or it very likely would. You're probably going to need a passport, right? So there's some reliance upon legal interstices. So I guess one potential negative there is, let's say you're traveling and you're in some other country, and there's some law that comes down where they're suspending certain passports in America, so then your passport isn't valid. You're going to be in a world of hurt. Unless you prepare for that ahead of time. I don't know what that would entail. I can't even imagine what someone would have to do if their passport was suspended and they were stuck in a country or something. I don't know, but country shopping definitely has its benefits. When you mentioned the homeschooling example, you could also move somewhere where the taxes, the extortion is less harsh. I mean, there are any number of reasons, someone could country shop. That could definitely increase your personal freedom, as long as, you do your legal research and you find out what it would necessitate.
From some point of view, it works really well within the EU. At the moment, you could conceivably not have a passport at all, and you could move in, I don't know, like 20 countries, and the controls are gone. Okay, so let's recap. So you got your money. You got some mobility going on.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next?
Correct. Yep. So you've got your money, and you've got the money, and now you're looking for what strategy of freedom what freedom strategy you're going to move on to. So the next one here that I think would be interesting, although not very, I would say, with how used to certain amenities a lot of people have gotten. I don't think this one's going to be that popular, but it is an option. Wilderness Vonu. I mentioned Rayo's polypropylene or polyethylene A tent. I don't remember which one it is. Regardless, it's like a plastic tent or plastic canopy, whatever. But yeah, I mean that's one option. If you're very, very nature inclined and you can survive in the wilderness. I mean, you're very, very mobile, and you're probably not going to come across a lot of people out there in the middle of the woods. So yeah, again, mobility was crucial to him, and Wilderness Vonu made Rayo very, 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 very mobile. They still had the van, by the way. They used that for import-export, going to get goods and supplies, and then also like when Rayo conceivably, I'm guessing he did, went and got jobs in the cities or something. They still used the van to travel. But yeah, they were able to pack up all their stuff very, very quickly and relocate if it was ever necessary. And Wilderness Vonu was talked about quite a bit in that book, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on that here. But there's other ones of these where he kind of just mentions them kind of in passing, like here's one potential option, here's some pros, here's some cons, and then move on. Just kind of what he did. Because he wasn't experimenting with all of those. These were just things that he kind of thought were potential ideas.
Yeah, his thing was this wilderness camping, basically, right?
Yeah, at least, yeah. Up as far as we know, up till 1974, yes. Now, what he did after that, we don't. I mean, yeah, he certainly could have gotten one of those trimaran sailboats and sailed around the world. He could have set up an intentional community on the water. He could have done a lot of things, but
space. It was space, I think.
Space. Oh, he built himself a rocket.
He colonized. He was the first space nomad.
Well, he was an engineer. I don't know. Maybe he found an island somewhere, built a space shuttle, and launched off to Mars or something.
Yeah, and because of relativity, he'll outlive us all. Actually.
Indeed, he will. Indeed, he will.
You see, I'm working on the religion. All right.
Oh man.
What's next?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, this is the one this is my favorite one, just because I think of all of the possibilities. I think in the direct action series we talked about this one because we talked about Vonu in two episodes of the direct action series, and it totaled up to like 5 hours. And we went to a lot more depth with this one, but the minimalist sailboating. Love this idea. Would you ever consider moving out in a sailboat, Philip?
Actually, yes, because I have a friend who's really interested in it. So yeah, that's very, very promising.
Yes. Okay, very good. So I'm going to read just a couple of quotes here from Rayo's book. Quote, one excellent way to combine the advantages of permanent residence with mobility is by making home aboard a boat. With the development of molded fiberglass hulls and synthetic fiber rigging and sails, yachts are becoming less expensive and easier to maintain. Already comparing not too unfavorably with land-based dwellings of the same size. As more libertarians take to the water, some will doubtless anchor and migrate more or less together as a semi-permanent waterborne community, saving time and money through the exchange of services. Internal free trade not subject to the scrutiny of any state. Continuing forward, he says, quote, the voluntary floating association has some advantages over the free hamlet in the hills. Not only will anchors be lowered where state interference is minimal, the very mobility discourages intervention. For instance, state school officials seldom molest the children of transients. Another blessing for parents. Differences of objective and conflicts of personality, which may disrupt an immobile intentional community, are easily resolved. The dissenters weigh anchor. And a community can develop by easy steps and without formal direction. No would-be founder need acquire a large tract of land, uncertain as to market demand or the response of state. The floating voluntary society begins with a population of 1, end quote. Now, Philip, I've thought about this one a lot, and even though it's kind of unlikely right now, I'd like to do it sometime in the future, but just kind of ponder this for a moment. So you find some some spot on the water where the water level is pretty stable, doesn't fluctuate very much, and you find some, like, you can go out and find an island somewhere. And I actually have a book that I purchased just a couple of weeks ago by John Fisher, the editor of Rayo's book. It's called Uninhabited Ocean Islands. So I'm looking forward to digging into that, which we'll probably talk about that on a future episode of the Vonnie podcast. But you find yourself a nice little island, okay? Tentatively, I guess, depending upon the climate, I'd imagine there'd be plenty of stuff that you could grow there. You could have like an organic garden. I mean, hey, if you wanted to bring over some pigs and some cows and stuff, maybe that'd be possible too. I don't know. But even if you're out in the middle of the ocean, I mean, I thought of this, and I don't know how possible it would be, because I'm not a captain on a ship or anything, not very knowledgeable on all of the ins and outs of the ocean. But I'm thinking, like, you get like one of those trimarans. They're the ones with the two things on the outside, and then the one in the center where the sails are. And you have that, and you have like a couple of like pontoon decks or something like that. I don't know exactly what they would be called. But you kind of like convert both of those into like organic gardening or something, like where you grow all of your food. There's so many possibilities, man. There really are. And again, the mobility aspect is huge with the sailboating, and obviously Rayo's whole thing, invulnerability to coercion, the mobility helped with that. And also, I mean, the Coast Guard is like, if you're like so many miles off the coast, kind of in no man's land, are there really going to be any governments that come after you if they don't know you're actually there? I mean, it seems really, really plausible and possible for whether it is for kind of what Rayo was getting at, and vulnerable to state coercion, or if it's just you want to be left alone. You want to be left alone, so you go out and you do the minimal sailboating thing. So that one seems like it has a lot of possibility. And there really aren't, and remember with the van nomadism, there were legal interstices that you had to deal with there. I would assume there'd be a lot less with the sailboating. So as far as invulnerability to coercion goes, I see a lot of potential with the minimalist sailboating, and that actually is starting to come around too.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of people doing it. Maybe you've even interviewed somebody.
Yeah, I haven't interviewed anybody on that. So if I could find one, I would definitely interview them. But yeah, during the direct action series, he played a video of this lady. Yeah, she was doing the minimalist sailboating thing, and so essentially she'd go live out in the water. They would do whatever they wanted to, and then when they needed supplies, they'd weigh anchor down there out there on at the dock. They'd go get their supplies, then they'd go back out in the water, and that seems really, really ideal. Seems like a peaceful life.
There's so many strategies to get this done. It's basically one of those cases where if you have the will and the guts, and you're willing to take risks, you can do it even with no money down. There are people who they just go to some island or some coastal city, maybe Latin America, whatever, and they work in a dockyard. And basically, as a repair guy, they build those skills, and you can actually just go there, work there, pick up some really downtrodden hull for nothing, and during the day work in the docks, during your free time fix it up, and it's not unreasonable to be sailing in 6 months.
That's actually a really, really great idea. It definitely is. And I want to make sure that your listeners understand that. Again, Vonnie was shades of gray, and it can be applied to your life and however you want to and however you can do it. You don't have to go live in the middle of the woods. You don't have to withdraw from society. You don't have to do that. I mean, as long as you're becoming invulnerable to coercion and your competence is increasing, then yeah, I mean that's fine, and there are a lot of options. There are definitely a lot of options, and Vonuing, again, you don't have to move out to the wilderness. You can Vonu in cities, which we'll get to here in a moment. So I just want to make that very clear. I don't want your listeners to be turned off by saying, okay, so you're saying if I want to become a Vonuan, I have to move out of the city into the middle of the woods, and I can't associate with anybody. Yeah, not interested. Well, yeah, don't worry. We'll get to some other examples here. And also, Rayo was just a very interesting and unique individual. We kind of already discussed this one, well, at least briefly with the minimalist sailboating, but intentional communities. Yeah, the main problem is the lack of mobility. You're very, very vulnerable. If you're in America, you're going to be vulnerable to the local government. Now, like if you're off grid living, this could pose a problem with nuisance abatement. There's actually an example in Castilla County, Colorado, where this happened. I mean, a bunch of off-gridders who, they bought their land, and they were kind of forced out from nuisance abatement. So depending upon what your intentional community is.
What is that? What is nuisance abatement?
Yeah, so nuisance abatement is where like local regulations and ordinances. So for example, like they may say like the local government might require you to have a septic tank, or they'll fine you every single day. Or fine you like every single month, and if you don't pay, then they take your property essentially. So it's just local, it's the local regulations for like septic and and maybe like the size of your shed or.
Wait, Shane, are you saying that if you want to be a Vonuan, you can't have a septic tank? Right? That's what I got from it.
No. The off-grid homesteaders there in Castilla, they weren't Vonuans. They definitely weren't Vonuans because they kind of were using
because they had the septic tank.
No.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, they were utilizing illegal interstice, and the local government closed down that interstice, and then it kind of turned into a crap show. And
but what's the story there? I mean. What happened? What were they doing there?
So essentially, it was a really good place for it was a really popular place for off-grid homesteaders. And these are the folks that they may have a small structure, they may live in like an RV, they tend to stay off of like the electrical grid. Like they have their own sources of power, they have their own means for septic, and I think in that instance the issue was they were using there were these like these special events, they could apply for like a special permit where they could stay somewhere for a month, or some length around that time. But they found the legal interstice where they just kept reapplying for those same permits, and that was not the design. That was not what the local government was intending. So when they found out about it, they closed that down, and then they had to. I think the septic tanks were involved is when that kind of came into play, and they said, okay, so you actually are living here. This isn't like special parking, therefore you have to install a septic tank. Or there's some other regulations as well that came into play. But yeah, they were some of them were kicked off of their land, and it was a really bad event. Not good. So there's some caution there too. If you're going to start an intentional community or something, and you're going to do kind of like what the folks did in Castilla County, and you rely upon legal interstices, that's not good. That's not good because you might get kicked off your land. So that's just kind of a word of caution there. Yeah, I'll kind of go through the pros and kind of the pros and the cons here. The intentional communities are much more achievable than sovereign free ports, which we'll get to in a moment, or taking over a state. Which we'll also get to here in a moment. It's much more achievable. I mean, there are intentional communities around today. I'd say the Houston Freethinkers, again, being one. Liberate RVA in Richmond, Virginia would be another example of kind of an intentional community. But there are some cons, too. I mean, again, Philip, you kind of mentioned, having, like, trying to convince, you kind of get sick of, like, having to try to convince others, and you want to find freedom now. I mean, one of the cons is you do have to find people to join your intentional community. You got to find like-minded people. And then you also need to, convince them to strategically relocate if they're interested in joining. So this would be something like, are you familiar with the Free State Project in New Hampshire?
Yeah. But I'm not sure every listener is.
Yeah. So this was a project started in I think 2008, and they were trying to get 20,000 signers to move to New Hampshire, the Free State Project, and their entire thing is, infiltrate local government and make it more friendly is kind of what they've been from the start. And so they had to convince people to relocate to New Hampshire. So that would be an example of one of the cons.
The basic idea was if enough liberty-minded people move to this relatively sparsely populated state, they can have enough political influence to make it more favorable. Maybe secede in some extreme versions, but yes, definitely just make it more friendly. So that's the plan. It's still happening.
Yeah, that is the plan. But again, the collective movementism thing comes into play, especially if it's like political. Now, I'll give a counterexample to this in a moment, but obviously, from when the New Hampshire, from the Free State Project, it has kind of, it's still like there's still kind of focus on the same goal, but it's obviously gotten a lot more broad, or a lot broader. So again, that's one of the issues with collective movementism is the more people that join, the further away from the goal that it tends to end up. Now, a counterexample of that would be something like Liberate RVA, and it's an anti-political. They're apolitical, and they're just trying to convince people that they don't need government. Their enrichment, and they've had some pretty good pretty decent success there. But yeah, it does require inevitably that you need to convince people to join the community, and they're having people that have relocated to Richmond, so that's actually a pretty good example of a successful intentional community, and a very rare positive example. Those are all the pros and the cons for the intentional community. I think it's a good idea. This is from Rayo's book, quote, "A Vonu association of a few dozen to a few hundred will likely be only a little more self-sufficient than one family. A remote, non-Vonu town of this size probably has a welder, dairy, nurse, maybe even a small machine shop. But most goods and many services are more economical to import than to produce there. Even in a country of 100,000 people, such as Bahama, most items are imported. The major advantage of a Vonu association compared to a lone family, easier, better, import-export." As I mentioned before, his first project that he was kind of involved in was the Free Isles Project, and that never came to fruition. So he decided to go find freedom himself. Then in his book, he started to concede later on that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have like a Vonu intentional community or something of that nature. It would it'd make it a lot more efficient, and then also we'd have access to more services. So he kind of it was an interesting progression that he had. So it was kind of groupie thing with the Free Isles. And then he kind of went, super individualist. And then, like, once he was out there and he was starting to think about it more, he said, okay, maybe, division of labor and law of comparative advantage and stuff could help me out here. So, yeah, I think, I would be in favor of some sort of intentional community or something along those lines. So he kind of backslid a little bit, but I wouldn't say in a bad way.
Yeah, I guess he kept trying the community angle in a way, right? Kept coming back to it, maybe.
That was I think that's kind of what his goal shifted to, because he realized the benefits of it. But again, he was a very particular person, and I guess he just didn't find anyone that he really wanted to start one of those things with. So I guess maybe he should have worked with what he had rather than what he desired. But I don't know. I'm really curious, although we'll never really know. I'd be curious to see if he ever really did kind of start one of those intentional communities or anything like that, because there's no way to know. He stopped writing.
From the book, it seems like he was very much into some very strong terms, strong labels for people. He was hardcore with that, controlled schizophrenics, etc. My guess is that probably made, that kind of thinking makes it hard to connect to other people.
Yeah, and also keep in mind too that he was an engineer, and something I've kind of noticed, and correct me if you've kind of witnessed things differently, but when people are extremely rational and logical, sometimes the kind of alternative aspect of trying to be understanding is kind of difficult for some of those folks. So, and now that we're psychoanalyzing Rayo 40 years after the fact, but
yeah, I'm sorry if he's listening.
Yeah, sorry, Rayo. But yeah, I think that is a good point, and yeah, I mean that could turn some folks off. Yeah, he used very, very strong labels to describe some folks. So there is that. I think that's something good to note. All right, ready for the next one here?
Okay.
All right, so the sovereign free port. Oh, this one's interesting. So you need to get a treaty with a hosting nation state. You've got to get that land somehow. So legally, this would be known as a special economic zone. So the sovereign free port requires legal interstices in order to get it started, as well as capital investment. Kind of an issue. And then, if you've studied history, if you or your listeners have studied history, you should understand like the governments have the inclination to once some place gets profitable, they like to take it over and take over the tax base. So with a sovereign free port, once it becomes profitable, it's likely that the hosting nation state or some other nation state would claim it as a tax base. So that's kind of a negative. But ideally, if a sovereign free port was to kind of be developed, which it's further along down the line of Vanu, it would be something far down the line. So it's kind of hard to conceptualize now. But ideally, if Vanu got to the point where this was a possibility, ideally people would be the individuals that lived there and that traded there would do the whole private defense agency thing, to defend themselves against that sort of invasion. But again, that one's hard to conceptualize. Nothing like that's I guess kind of what Ray was talking about is kind of really never existed. I guess the closest example would be something like Hong Kong.
Yeah, that definitely seems like further along the line. I mean, imagine how much advertisement you would get if you did this. Like you could kiss goodbye to security culture right there.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, you're definitely right. And it's also kind of worth mentioning that some of the first ones that we kind of walked through, like van nomadism, the wilderness Vanu, the sailboating, the country shopping, those are all things that you can do individually. They do not require other people, and those are also more likely and more possible to do. And we mentioned the sailboating. That's very, very possible. If there's a will, there's a way. So those are more possible. And again, like the intentional communities, the sovereign free ports, taking over a state, those all require other people. There's just no way to get around that. And they're also huge operations, like huge projects. So I guess with those, I guess the reason for mentioning those is they are things that Rayo discussed. And they are possibilities, but I would kind of I would posit that some of the ones that only require you, the ones you can pick up and do like tomorrow if you really want to. Those are the ones that should get most of the focus as far as if this is attractive to you. I mean, obviously you've got to start. You've got to become a Vanuan first before you can open up like a a sovereign free port or something like that. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Right. So is there any other strategy?
I guess there's one other one I want to kind of mention. I saved this for last because, again, we kind of started with all of the, the strategies like wilderness Vanu and van nomadism where, at least Rayo's application of, I guess a couple of those, the application is definitely wilderness Vanu and, let me see, another one's not coming to mind. Wilderness Vanu and just moving out in the middle of the woods. Let's put it that way. Those require strategic relocation to the middle of nowhere essentially. But you can also Vanu in cities. So we're kind of going full circle here. So you don't have to. Maybe this should have been mentioned second, in case some folks thought this was some move out into the wilderness thing, but it's not. It can be, but it's not. So Vanuing in cities. So it is true that Vanu requires a lifestyle change, but some of those previous things may not be possibilities for some folks, and not everyone can move out in the middle of the woods or, set sail for sunnier waters, as Ray would put it. But there are plenty of ways to become more invulnerable to coercion in cities, and this is something that Rayo said about it, quote, "A third approach involves a blend of concealment and deception. Construct hidden soundproofed apartments and workshops beneath or within an owned building, ostensibly used for other purposes. Since such chambers could be blast, fire, and fallout resistant, this approach offers some protection against the nuclear attack as well as day-to-day predation," end quote. Now, I guess one note there, he was fearful of nuclear attack back. This is around the Cold War, I'm pretty sure. So he was fearful of that, and yeah, now we kind of look at that and say it was an irrational fear. But he wasn't like a lot of the doom porn folks today who prepare for like a nuclear fallout or World War III. It wasn't something like that. This was a lifestyle change, and that was just one other thing that he defended against. So I wanted to make that note so people didn't think, oh, he's a kook that thought there's going to be a nuclear attack. No, he was fearful of it, but that was just another thing that he kind of defended against. And this is where, I mean, vomiting in cities could be done. I mean, yeah, again, like you have like a concealed apartment where, in a warehouse or something where there's no visible entry point. But yeah, like an industrial park building, just ponder this for a moment. So you have a legitimate business as the front with an inaccessible, passage to a secret underground. Now you could have like an underground warehouse, underground apartments. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. As far as like this would be expanding beyond just like a living area to where you'd be either small level manufacturing or high level manufacturing. So it'd pretty much be like just a concealed business. Now I'll provide one example, and I think this is probably the best one. It is pop culture and all, and a lot of people have seen this show. It's a really popular show, so I think I'll provide this example to give people like an idea of something to point to. But have you ever watched the show Breaking Bad?
Oh yeah, many times.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really like it.
Very good, very good. Okay, so you'll be familiar with this. So this would be an example of something like vomiting in cities. So you remember when Walt and Jesse began cooking for Gus, the Los Pollos chicken guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you remember when they so there's that big laundromat with all of those washers and dryers. Looked like it was just it was a legal business. Nothing to see here, folks. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had underneath that, concealed, was the big room, the big high cost room where they actually cooked their illicit products. That would be a very good example. I mean, obviously you don't you can do whatever you want. You don't have to cook that, but you can do whatever you want with that. But structure.
if you don't, you're not volume. I just want to say that.
No, that's just a possibility with the ethical enclaves. It's not a requirement.
Okay.
But
too bad.
But yeah, that would be an example of vomiting in cities, and you could have a very profitable business, underground business, doing something, concealing something like that.
I have to say I find this one a little bit confusing in a way. So maybe you can help me understand. So if you're out in the wilderness, basically the idea is you're unreachable fundamentally. But if you're in a city, I guess if you stay in that place all the time, it's kind of a similar thing. Although it seems a little bit less likely that it would work. But I don't know. Would you just not come out, or what's the idea? I feel like I'm missing something here.
Yeah. So and this one, and this is kind of why I saved this one for last, but. Yeah, so there's you make a good point there. So obviously out in the woods, it's a lot. You can be much easier. It's much easier to be invulnerable to coercion. But if you have if you live in industrial, if you have a business, an underground business, and a industrial park building like that, like underground, it would definitely be harder to hide. But Rayo went into concealment and deception quite a bit and kind of gave some ideas there. But again, I guess ideally it would be pretty much inaccessible to anyone except that knew it was there. And then also it would just take some ingenuity. It would take some ingenuity as far as if it was actual business, getting supplies in and out of there. And then also leaving and coming and going. I mean, the import export of that would have to be very, very creative. It would be more difficult. That's definitely true. That's definitely true. But I mean, yeah. Ideally, though, the profit incentive would be high enough to where if that business was found out and everything was confiscated, that it would still be worth it. You got to make a lot of money quick, essentially, before you get found out. And there's also the something that Kyle Reed and I talked about, my co-host on the Volume podcast, that you could have multiples of these. In different countries too. You can country shop. You can even travel there by via your minimalist sailboat, and then you could have you could Vonu in various cities. So it's really interesting how these things can compare. But yeah, that one we don't have that all figured out yet. Just an idea posited by Rayo that we're going to try to further develop in season 3, which we really haven't gotten to yet. But let me take this back to a smaller scale, which would be easier to fathom. Kyle actually wrote an article or a fiction story called an Agorist Anecdote. The character's name was Rebecca, and she had a hidden bedchamber. So it was a hidden room where she stayed most of the time, and she only went out for import export. And that was actually based off of a guy that Kyle actually knew that was doing this back in the 90s. So that one's could be easier to much easier to fathom. That would essentially be your Vonu home base in a city. So it would be separate for that hidden bedchamber, for example. That would be the Vonu home base where you're invulnerable to coercion. And then you'd only leave there to import and export ideally. So that one would be a little easier to fathom. Like if the example that Kyle used was the guy, he couldn't get a lease anywhere because he did some bad things in his past, and he couldn't get a lease or mortgage or anything like that. So he had a business, and he just concealed an apartment there inside of it. That was inaccessible to the public. So that one might be easier to fathom than this this Breaking Bad sort of operation in the laundromat.
I like the actually the pest control version of that. That was the most creative in my mind, if you remember that. So they would cook meth in whatever house is being bombed.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some possibilities here, and someone with more unorthodox urban living experience could probably think of more stuff than I could.
Yes, and like I said, we're just now pretty much halfway through season 1, and that'll be season 3 before we actually start to develop these quite significantly. So yeah, we're kind of laying the foundation with the book first because I mean, obviously people want to get to the action, and we do too. But we're kind of bringing this, we're kind of bringing this like out from 6 feet under. It's been there for like 40 years. We're trying to breathe some life back into it, and it's a brand new concept to everybody except Kyle and I at this point, really. So we've got to kind of get through that preliminary stuff first. But just a couple more points here on the Vonuing in cities. But abandoned buildings could also make for good Vonu home bases, as long as they truly are Vonu and aren't ridden with private criminals. So if there's like I know there's I've seen links to this on Fascist Book, but there some abandoned towns here in Illinois that like no one ever goes to anymore. Those could be potentially potentially good Vonu home bases. For like Vonu, it would be Vonuing in cities, but it would be an abandoned city. So that is kind of an idea there. I don't know how likely. It just depends upon where you are.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to go to one of these. I want to go to one of these one day because it's just kind of cool. There's a city out there, nobody lives there. It kind of sounds like almost an ideal place if it's really properly deserted, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and I guess one kind of good thing too is, I mean, some of that, some of those buildings would probably some of those would still be livable. So I mean, other than some basic maintenance, you could probably move in there very very cheaply, and obviously no one's going to come and try to collect collect rent or property taxes from you in that location. So I think that could definitely be a possibility. Yeah, I think it could be a possibility. Just obviously depending on some factors, but you wouldn't move into like an abandoned city ridden by private crime, because that would make you more vulnerable to coercion. You'd probably get robbed. So just keep that in mind.
It's true.
So yeah, those are just kind of possible strategies on finding more freedom and also becoming more invulnerable to coercion. So yeah, we kind of started with the ones that you could pick up and do tomorrow. Acquire yourself that are far more likely. Obviously, regardless of whether you're going to Vonu or not, you're probably if you're listening to Philip's podcast, you're probably already working on your frugality and financially independent stuff. So if you're already working there, if you're already on your way there, then you might be ahead of some other folks who might be attracted to Vonu. But yeah, I mean, some of these initial strategies, I think they're very very possible. I think they're very possible, and I think they need to be looked into more, and then also developed beyond what Rayo did back in the 60s and 70s, because a lot has changed. A lot has definitely changed, and I think some of these things need to be revisited, and actually some of them without even Vonu being referenced. Country shopping, the financially independent aspect, the freelancing, the frugality, the food storage. A lot of things he talked about weren't really done then, but now they are. So I think just that also lends some credibility too. Rayo could kind of foresee what was coming and what people would be interested in. So I think that's kind of important to mention as well.
Yeah, and I think it has potential, kind of like food for thought. There's a parallel that I see here where if you read, might sound weird, but it'll make sense just a sec. So if you read like ancient Greek philosophers, especially the ones concerned with lifestyle stuff like Stoics and Epicureans and Cynics, you see kind of early versions of personal development ideas. It's pretty raw, but it's impressive for the time. And maybe Rayo's is something like that. It's like the fountainhead of this stuff. If it's if he genuinely was first with some of these ideas, and then you can look at that, be inspired by that, but then since now we have different technology and more knowledge, so yeah, you can build on that and modernize it and expand it.
Yes,
which you have done actually.
Yeah, and as Rayo said, Vonu is yours for the making. It's yours for the making. Like for you pioneers out there who want freedom so bad that you're willing to try a lot of things. I mean, you really want it, and you may be willing to. If you already started the financially independent early retirement thing or frugality, those are lifestyle changes. They are. So you've already done it once, and you're already on your way to becoming Vonu. Have fun developing it. And obviously report back and let us know, and let people know what's been working for you, because there are some of these things that I cannot just I just cannot test out. I can't. We all have our our capabilities, and there's just some things that we can't do. So this is for you to develop. This is just it's spontaneous. It's whatever works for you. And whatever you can do with Vonu right now is that's what it is.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. It's basically a new field in some ways. You can make a name for yourself developing one of these strategies, actually.
Yes.
And get in touch. I'm very interested in if you get the space nomadism thing going, I'm down with that. But if it's something less cool, I'm still interested. So yeah.
Yeah.
Shane, it could be that some people are doing some of this stuff, maybe different names, different origins, different motivations, but the same strategies. So who knows? We keep blasting this out. We might just find someone who will be like, oh yeah, I've been doing that for forever.
Mm-hmm. That is true. And if they come across this podcast or the Vonu podcast, maybe they'll hear something else and say, I haven't thought about combining that with my van dwelling. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I think I'll give that a shot. But yeah, you can combine as I was kind of mentioning when we were walking through this, you can combine a lot of these different things. You definitely can. I want to read one quote from Rayo, and this kind of just shows you the flexibility of Vonu, and this is kind of what Rayo envisioned too. Quote, "A Vonuan to me is not just someone living in a particular manner. Lifestyles may change. A lifestyle which was Vonu 100 years ago may not be Vonu today. Some lifestyles that are Vonu today were not possible 100 years ago and may not be Vonu 50 years from now. A Vonuan is someone who places a high value on relative invulnerability to coercion. Someone for whom freedom is worth a fair amount, though not infinite, of effort, inconvenience, discomfort. To a Vonuan, Vonu is not just a means to other ends, nor is it an ultimate end. Like most qualities of life and life itself, it is both. A Vonuan will choose whatever way of living offers personal sovereignty and will change lifestyle again and again if necessary." End quote. So, Vonu is yours for the making.
Above everything else, what impresses me most about Rayo, and the reason I've decided to interview Shane about him, is that he had a strong focus on the actionable in an environment that was much more interested in philosophizing at the time, kind of the same as today. Well, Rayo went out, he learned new skills and changed himself, rather than waiting for others to give him freedom. I believe this is a powerful lesson, whether you agree with Rayo's particular political and world outlook or not. As I've said in my previous article, my particular non-actionable addiction was politics, and economics too. It may be something else in your case. Anything that you pay attention to and are emotionally invested in, that maybe fills you in anger and fear, and of which you can do very little about, it all falls under this category. Can you stay safe without following the news? Yes, if rather than trying to dodge bullets or plead with the shooter, you instead focus on becoming as invulnerable and independent as possible. Do you have to become a hermit, sacrifice your impact on the world, on making it a better place? I don't think so. Not only will your personal change inspire others, but you will be able to have a voice from a much safer position. So, as always, I dare you to focus on the actionable today. Speaking of which, you can learn more about Rayo at vonupodcast.com, where Shane Radcliffe covers the philosophy, the tactics, and the strategies in much more detail.